slidey pose, did the guy and Kim fell in the way.
Painting the roses red, we painting the roses red. Painting the roses red. Painting the roses red. Where the butterflies get them in the morning. Where the butterflies get them in the morning. Get them in the morning. Painting the roses red, we painting the roses red. Painting the roses, painting the roses, painting the roses red. Painting the roses, painting the roses, painting the roses red. Painting the roses, painting the roses, painting the roses red. Painting the roses, painting the roses, painting the roses red.
Really, and the slidey pose, did the guy and Kim fell in the way. Really, and the slidey pose, did the guy and Kim fell in the way. Really, and the slidey pose, did the guy and Kim fell in the way. Really, and the slidey pose, did the guy and Kim fell in the way.
Painting the roses red, we painting the roses red. Painting the roses red. Painting the roses red. Where the butterflies get them in the
hang on. Why is my model turned off? That's not supposed to happen. We fixed this. Come on, come on, come on. Here we go. Now you can see me. Ho ho. I had this issue the last time I streamed. Anyway. Big stretch. Righty. Hoi toy to toy toy. So, welcome to VTuber 101. This section of the series, we'll be going over you as a VTuber. What things you need to consider when you're creating a character and the content you want to produce, as well as some other things to consider as well. Now, just to set your expectations, I'm not a AAA streamer. I'm not claiming to be all-powerful or knowing or very successful like the likes of Chibidoki, like the likes of Iron Mouse. This is just me creating content that I would have liked to have seen in the format I would have preferred around 4 or 8 months ago. And it's more a compilation of things that I think someone should know when they're considering VTubing, when they're trying to figure things out at certain stages of their development as a VTuber. In addition to that, we'll be going over a lot of concepts around character design. Now, character design is big, it is vast, it is complex. My phone's going ring ding, what the fuck? There we go. It is big, complex, there is a lot of parts to it, and there is no one way to create a character, to create a theme, and to stylize yourself. So everything I say here is more to give you the foundations, because just like a house, all good things start with a solid foundation and evolve from there, because what you'll find is going all throughout this video, you'll come up with ideas of what you want to do, how you want to build your character, how you want to stylize yourself, and not produce, but perform on your own virtual stage. And after all that, my one hope, my one goal for you is to have it where you can find your starting point so that you can go from here into the next stage and start producing content on Twitch, on YouTube, or on TikTok as a VTuber. No. This is not an encyclopedic, every single little niche thing you need to know presentation. It is just you in broad strokes. Now, if that's something that you're into, if that's something you want to see done in more depth, or if there's something that you want to be expanded on, I will take note of that, and if and when I reach affiliate, I'll produce this again in a more expanded format. If you would like to reach me to say I want XYZ expanded on more, I want you to go into more depth as to this particular thing, you can type an exclamation point links into the chat at any time. This will bring up my socials. I'm active on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, Discord, and right here on Twitch. So send me a message at any time and I'll respond to it as best I can. Now, as for these presentations, I'm a big believer in the KISS principle, or keep it super simple. So how that's going to apply to this presentation is we are going to tie it to these points here. The anatomy of a VTuber, how a VTuber is structured. Whether you should go 2D or 3D. The voodoo that you do, which is where we'll go into depth as to the types of things you'll do as part of your performance, as well as how to schedule your streams and if a debut is right for you. Now, in the previous presentation, we touched on this as developed by Kazuna AI, where she took all the performance scheduling from the idol scene in Asia and reworked it so that as opposed to the performance and the interaction with the fans being two separate things, the performance and the interaction with the fans are now the same process as opposed to being done one after the other. So what we'll do is that we'll just break them apart and look at them in a more microscopic sense. So, like we touched upon in the previous video, an idol is a character that performs for people. Now, performs for people. Sorry, I have some. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse at the moment. Now, this character does not have to be anime in style. It can be done in any style you want. And when you're thinking about the idea of a character, you don't have to act as that character if you don't want. It can literally just be a mask that you put on where you just act as yourself through that mask. And in regards to the performance itself, you'll oftentimes see people do like singing, dancing, etc., so on and so forth. With VTubing, when you think of it long term or short term, everything you do should ideally be goal specific. So if you see someone being successful doing, like, say, art or playing a particular game or interacting with other VTubers, if that's not specific to your goals as a VTuber, then don't be terribly concerned about it, because while you may feel like you're missing out, if that's not specific to your goals or the type of content that you want to produce, then it's not really something that you should be terribly concerned with, because that's not relevant to your success. But if you feel as though that is relevant to your goals or the type of content that you want to produce, that's when you start asking the big questions of how do I integrate that into my performance as a VTuber on whatever platform I happen to be streaming on. Now, here's an example of someone who follows the more traditional form of idol performances out of Japan. I'm not going to try and pronounce her name, but she's anime in style, which was what was originally done when VTubing first became a thing, and very much follows every single styling cue from idol culture as it sits in Japan currently and in the past. She is effectively a virtual idol, which is pretty much she copies everything that an idol does, but she does it in a virtual space. And she's released many albums, she's been with many different agencies, and largely streams on YouTube, and is successful in her own right. Now, everything you see here is something that she's by and large developed herself, and while she has been very successful in her own right by developing her character and the styling that goes with it, that pulls you in towards her and makes you believe or feel that this is a real thing that you're looking at, it is not the only way to structure the styling of your character. Take RNGesus, for example. RNGesus, again, anime in style, and as opposed to basing it on things in Japanese culture, it's more based on Christian theological writings. Now, RNGesus is more of a reference to board games, where people will oftentimes say that their roles being successful are up to the dice gods. So sometimes, and I've heard people say this before, they'll just roll a dice and say, "Save me, RNGesus," before they roll, in an attempt to get better favor with the quote-unquote dice gods. Now, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't sing, but what I do know he does is that he plays a lot of D&D, plays a lot of video games, and that's a performance that he puts on Twitch, and in his own right, he's successful. Now, Cabal, or Cab, if you want to call him that, again, another does a completely different way of styling his character and putting together his performance. Everything he does is gothic in style and is based on his own tastes and interests in the horror and the supernatural, because prior to him streaming or becoming a VTuber, he worked a lot in that sector of the entertainment game. And his performance is he plays video games, but another niche interaction that he has with his chat, which is completely separate of him playing video games, so he'll oftentimes get bullied by his chats with them just showering him with bits, which, if you don't know what bits are on Twitch, it is essentially you pay money for virtual currency, which the performer then receives and then exchanges for actual cash. And he's very conscious of the fact that he receives a large amount of money, and he tries to encourage his viewers to not give him too many bits, and then they just ignore him and give him bits out of spite or because they see it as a challenge. And he has a very interesting discourse back and forth between his community when this happens, and that's also how he performs on Twitch when he does his streams. Now, SkyT, again, another show. Her art style is cartoonish, and it's based on her own artistic abilities that she developed prior to becoming a VTuber. Now, her content, her performance, is she plays a little bit of D&D, does a little bit of video games, draws, and just vibes. And her entire performance is packaged together and delivered as a comfort streamer, which if you don't know what that is, it's just someone who vibes and tries to relax and have a good time and share that experience with her viewers on Twitch. Now, those are some examples of how characters have been both created and put together with their performance to deliver an experience on a particular platform. But the question should be asked is, when you create your character, when you create this virtual mask, should you go down the 2D route or should you go down the 3D route? Well, there are pros and cons to both, and while I can't go over every single little one, what I can do is I can give you what I believe to be the things that are of most concern with each particular option. Now, with 3D, the pros are very much your presence will feel more animated, and it does allow for a lot more activities to be done during your performance. So these activities could be anything from VR games such as VR chat or virtual golf, or cooking games as well that you can do in VR. You can do dances as well, you can do live performances. There was an example with Fillion specifically where she collaborated with an IRL YouTuber. The possibilities are endless. In addition to that, it just provides a little bit more depth with your character and your performance as a whole. However, while there are a lot of free options, if you want something more specific to your design or to your theme or to your character, it can get very, very, very expensive. I've seen quotes as low as $500 for a total package. I have seen quotes as high as 15 to 20 grand. In addition to the cost side of things, it can get very, very, very expensive. And it does put a lot of strain on your computer as well, because as opposed to you just rendering your game and streaming to Twitch and recording video, you're also having to render this 3D object on top of that, which puts another percentage of load on your computer when you're trying to do all these other things as well. Now, because you're doing a 3D model, if you're doing things like TITs or Twitch integrated throne systems, or you're having a lot of different elements going on with different parts of your model moving and stuff like that, or interacting with other programs or integrations with Twitch, it does require a bit of testing prior to launch to ensure that that experience that you're trying to deliver is as smooth as possible. And that's some of the things that I would consider if I were to look into developing a 3D model. Now, when it comes to 2D, if you're doing something specific to your character, your theme, it can cost as little as $0. Like, people can put these together very easily with little to no effort. And an example of how I've done it is if I'll just bring it up now, because I think I still have it saved. And I do apologize, but this is going to look very scuffed. There we go. So this is something that I put together. It's basically just 2 images in Veo 2. And I used that when I was just trying to figure out, Twitch, OBS, how all that works together. And it's very great. But when I felt as though I was ready to level up a little bit, I contacted an artist and I got this made. Now this is a set of 4 images with eyes open, mouth closed, eyes open, mouth open, eyes closed, mouth closed, eyes closed, mouth open. And the reason I've done it like that is because it is the cheapest way to make your 2D character feel more animated. And it's no stress on my computer at all, and it's ridiculously easy to set up. Now, the cons of going down the 2D route is you tend to feel a little bit less animated when compared to a 3D model, which means there's not as much depth, which means you need to be a lot more careful with how you present yourself, present your character, present the thing. But if you are wanting to go down the more animated route, that's when you need to start considering what's called a fully rigged 2D model, which, if you don't know what you're doing with Photoshop, if you don't know what you're doing with Live 2D Cubism or an equivalent program, it can be quite time consuming to both set up and test to make sure that it works for what you're trying to do. And if you are going to get someone to do all that for you, again, there is a cost factor involved, with quotes being as low or as high as a 3D equivalent. Now, once you've decided all of that, whether you want to go 2D, whether you want to go 3D, once you have your character set up, it's time to figure out what is it you want to do. Now, this doesn't necessarily have to be done after your character is set up. It can be done before, but I've just organized it because it's how I did it personally. You can do it in any order you wish. Now, how you figure this out is, again, entirely up to you, but there are a couple ways that I found that it's easy to at least objectify this in your mind so you can start to brainstorm ideas. But of the options that I've gone through, this is what I believe to be the most simplest, cleanest, straightforward way to do it. So obviously you want to start with a name. What is your character going to be called? This can be based around theme of your character, or it can just be something that you pick from thin air. Ideally you want to keep the two integrated. Then you want to go into your background. Where is your character from? Are they the Instant Girl Next Door? Are they Cthulhu? Are they a super spy? And what are they going? What is their story? Why are they here? What have they done? You then want to go into the theme, which is kind of different from their background, but also kind of not. This is sort of the vibe, if you will, of what they're going to both present themselves as and how they're going to conduct themselves. So they could go for the more cutesy cozy vibe, they could go for the horror, the gothic, the spicy, the serious, the mother or the father vibe. And then you want to go a step further into your performance. So now that we've gone over the name, the background, the character, what are they going to do? Are they going to play games, draw art? Are they going to put model kits together? Are they going to talk about board games? Basically, what are you going to do on your virtual stage? Once we've gone, and then we go on to the last step, which is the platform that you're going to stream on. Is it going to be Twitch? Is it going to be YouTube? Is it going to be TikTok? Think very carefully about the platform, because each platform has the same but different rules that you need to play by. And especially when it comes to TikTok, you can't just stream on there straight away. There is a process that you have to go through before they'll actually let you go live. Now, if this is something that you're interested in, if it's something that you want to keep for later, I do have an empty slide available for you. You can take a screenshot of this, or if you want, you can message me anytime. I'm more than happy to send you a copy of this slide or the entire presentation itself. Again, you can contact me on my links, which are still displayed on the stream itself, or you can just send me a message via Twitch. That's all good. So, now that we've got those two things together, we now need to start thinking about the when of when we're going to stream. Now, for people who are just starting out and don't know exactly when they want to stream or when they can stream or how it's going to work for them, what I'd recommend is get your calendar and mark out 2 to 3 days where you have a couple of hours spare, either during the day or in the evening. You then want to stick to those days for about an entire calendar month, and then after that month, you'll have a good idea as to when you can either further commit to more time, or if what you've got now will work for you, or whether you need to stream on separate days. It's entirely up to you, but I'd recommend just doing what I've said for the first month so you can get sort of a feel for it, because it's one thing to play video games in your own time, it's another thing to actually commit to a schedule of playing video games, because you've gone from I'm just playing games by myself to now I'm repackaging that as a performance for sometimes 10, 100, 1,000 people at a time. Now, this is how I've done it personally. This is just something that I've thrown together on a website called Canva. So I've got my name, my character art, the days I'm streaming on, what I'm streaming, as well as my time zone as well. Now, for me, the time zone is important because a lot of my audience comes from the Americas, so I found that it's allowed for them to tune into my streams a lot easier if they know my time zone, because I can go, okay, if he's streaming at that time zone, and that means in whatever time zone America is, I have to be tuned in at this time to actually catch the performance. And I've also included this little Twitch symbol as well, just to remind them, hey, I stream on Twitch. Now that we've gone through some ways the characters have been put together, now that we've gone through how we're going to make our character, now that we've gone through how to schedule our performance and both what we are performing, we need to consider, if we will, a debut. Now, a debut isn't something that you'll necessarily do right at the beginning. It happens more when you've confirmed, at least to yourself, based on your interactions with your audience, as to what your character is and what your performance will be. Now, this isn't something that I'd recommend that you do straight away. A lot of the higher-end VTubers out there will say this is something that you should do once you have a lot more VODs put up on YouTube, a lot more content out there for people to bite into, because once you finalize your performance, they have something they can then watch once they discover what channels you post to, because if they just discover, hey, here is this person, and you have no content to show them, it sort of leaves them with a feeling of, well, why did I show up to, say, YouTube, for example, when you put all your VODs? Have something for them when they arrive. This allows them to interact with your past performances so that they can then be ready for you when you perform next, because they have an idea of whether they want to watch you or not. Now, these 2 points here are something that we've mentioned previously in the presentation, but we're going to look at them just a pinch more microscopically so that we can see how these would apply to us when we're considering debuting our character. Now, when we think of character design is a very, very complex thing, because it's all about shape theory, color theory, it's all about how we stylize ourselves, how we perform, but it can be simply explained as the process of making art that connects us to the character's theme or story. And how we know our character design is good is that we can know this by just glancing at the character from a distance, or just for a few seconds. Now, that sounds like a bunch of words, but now what we're going to do is we're going to give an example of bad character design versus good character design, so that we can see what that means in a more contextualized visual concept. So, if you've ever watched SpongeBob, you know that SpongeBob SquarePants, you know that this is SpongeBob, and he's like a goofy little guy, lives in a pineapple under the sea, and he's best friends with his mate Patrick. Now, SpongeBob SquarePants is a children's show where it's just them goofing around, having a good time, and living life. But I want you to take a couple seconds to look at this and ask yourself, is that really what the character is? Am I convinced of this when I look at them? No, probably not. You're probably looking at this and going, these guys are creepy, there is no way that they're children's characters. I don't believe this. This looks like something out of a horror movie. And you'd be correct to assume that, because this is a creative interpretation of these characters within that concept. But now I want you to keep those points in mind. Goofy, Fry Cook, Goofy Friend. And I want you to instead look at this art and ask yourself, is this the goofy guy who lives in the pineapple, and is this his friend? And are they characters in a children's show? The answer would probably be yes, because everything about their shapes, their color, and how they are set up convinces us of this from a glance, because they are very much designed to be that. And when it comes to your character specifically, that's when you should reference back to this. So when you have all of this filled out and you're completely sure what your character is, at least from a text standpoint, that's when you can start going, okay, now that I've got all this written down, I now need to think about, okay, what is my character going to look like based on all of this? So if there's something you can do yourself, great. Go out into the world, pick out objects, scenery, different characters relating to your theme, relating to your character, and try to think, how can I make my own character based off of these things, based off of my interests, based off of the theme and the background of my character. If that's something that you're not able to do, great news, there are a bunch of people out there who actually specialize in this. Most artists who do 2D or even 3D models do provide that as a service, or which they may charge for, or they may not. Depends on the artist. But in either route, whether you're doing it for yourself or whether you're asking an artist to create a character for you, the way you can make life easier on yourself or the person you're reaching out to for help is, again, have all this written down. Have objects, colors, themes relating to your character's background or swagger that you're going for written down, put it in an email to your person who's doing this for you, and then they'll be more easily able to create, samples of characters that they could create for you in a 2D or 3D format, and then you'll be able to have your character way more easily, because the less of this prep work you do, the harder it will be for either yourself or someone to actually create this character for you. Now, once you have all of that done, there are some things that you need to consider when you actually do your debut. Everything in your debut must be specific to the theme of your character. So if you have someone who is, say, a mad scientist, for example, but you have them doing all of their mad scientist stuff in, say, a swimming pool with, full of, rubber ducks and stuff like that, it's not going to be very compelling. Also, if they are a scientist, but instead they're, what does a scientist not do? If they are a scientist, but say they spend the entire performance fixing cars, there could be a bit of confusion as to, well, he is a scientist, but why is he being a mechanic? It doesn't really make sense. So make it specific to the theme of your character, but also related to the content that you want to produce. So maybe if your character is very, like a scientist, for example, maybe have it where they do a performance based on an experiment or something like that, or maybe you have it where you spend the first couple of minutes going into the lore of your character. Maybe they started out as some child in Nuremberg and wanted to create, cures for Alzheimer's, for example. So they go through all of that, and then you introduce yourself, say, hi, here I am, and then you go into playing a sciencey-based game, or doing a performance relating to the content that you want to produce. Once you have an idea of whether you want to put it together as a package or performance, and then rehearse again to make sure you have it down packed. But most importantly, this is a celebration of many, 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 many months of work. Because you don't just do this from day dot. It takes a lot of time, trial, and error to get to a point where you're ready to debut. Because it's you presenting your character in a finalized concept to the world. A lot of effort was done to get to this point, so you want to make it as fun and as enjoyable as possible, both for yourself and the people you truly know. Now, Do you need to debut? No. It's not necessary. Debuting is just another way of advertising yourself to the world. It is not a requirement. You do not have to do it. However, it is another option for you, and it is something that you should consider. Now, that's a lot of ground to cover, a lot of things to consider, and you might be scared by the idea of going down the 2D or 3D route, the fact that you now have to create, and you may not be a creative person. It could be very daunting. Or maybe you are a creative person, but you're worried about if what you're creating is quote-unquote good enough or is going to work. I want you to take a look at this picture. This guy is a man by the name of Bob Ross. Now, Bob Ross was a painter from way back when. And one of the things he's very famous for is this quote, we don't make mistakes, we make happy little accidents. Now, his entire performance was just drawing art, and when he did a hill that wasn't the way he wanted to, as opposed to just throwing up a painting, he just redid the hill a little bit, maybe he put some trees in it, maybe he painted it a slightly different color, and he made it work for the painting he was doing. Or maybe if he did a tree that was a little bit off, for example, he just painted another tree right next to it. You will make a lot of mistakes before your character is finalized. You will make a lot of decisions that you may work or may not work, that you may like or may dislike. And you will also make a lot of accidents as well, but every accident is an opportunity to learn from and grow from. So don't be afraid to make mistakes, because they are important and they help us learn and develop. And at that point, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. This is, again, not a complete guide. You may have got this far and thought, well, what happens if I don't do something mentioned in this video? Will I have done my character creation wrong? Will I have gone out of step? Would I be otherwise incorrect? Will my character design not be good enough? Being a VTuber at its core is a creative endeavor. And there is no one way to be creative as a VTuber. So, again, just referencing back to the previous slide, you will make a lot of mistakes. I make a lot of mistakes. Everyone makes a lot of mistakes, but provided that you stay on target to your goals, your performance, and what it is you're trying to do, you will be fine. And that is the presentation. So, thanks for the stream, watching the stream. I enjoyed making it a lot. There was a lot of redesign involved, and it was just a really good time for me personally. The next presentation, we will be going over the infrastructure, so things that you need to have on hand, such as computers, such as internet connection, and a whole bunch of other things relating to, the hardware and software required or not required for this. I will be streaming later on again tonight. I'm not sure what I will be streaming, but it will be something. And if you want to keep up to date, you can type in exclamation point links. Again, I'm active on Twitter, TikTok, Discord, and YouTube, and right here at home on Twitch. Thank you for tuning in. Stay froggy fresh, and I will see you on the next stream.